The full terms of Tua Tagovailoa's 4-year, $212.4 million contract.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast.
So let's jump right back into it with this contract. Finish the structure of the full term of the contract and go from there. The next chapter, we are through the fully guaranteed and guaranteed at signing dollars. There is some conditional guarantees for 2027, but the year one and year two money is fully guaranteed with the exception of the performance incentives. That's $1 million a piece, starting in 2025 as far as how many games you play, you show up for your workouts, so on and so forth. 2026 salary, that $54 million salary for 2026, that guarantees next March in 2025, a year in advance. 2027 has money that is guaranteed for injury, but it also has $3 million that fully guarantees in 2026, March of 2026. Why did the Dolphins do that? This is where the cash flow dramatically changes. You have Tua on board for $43 million in cash. You have him on board for potentially $51 million in cash. You have him on board for $54 million in cash. 2027, the cash dips below $40 million. Tua himself he's got a $31 million salary that is due that year. $3 million of that guarantees in March of 2026. So if Tua makes it to the 2026 season, $3 million of this $31 million salary will guarantee. He will also carry the fourth of the 5 years of the prorated signing bonus in 2027. There is currently no scheduled proration of the 2025 money, but he is due for a $5 million roster bonus that is due to him. It's not guaranteed, but it's an additional $5 million that he can collect if he is on the roster at the start of 2027. Usually some date within the first week of the league calendar year is when a check like that needs to be cut. So the Dolphins have an opportunity in this window, assuming they don't do other funny money stuff with the contract, which I have to imagine 2025 will have some level of restructure. It's just a question of how much, right? This is where the guaranteed money runs out. The rest of the salary, or the rest of the $20 million that has any kind of conditions to this, guarantees in March of 2027. So there's a big decision at the start of the league calendar year in 2027 that you're looking at a $5 million roster bonus and $17 million in salary that guarantees versus just $3 million that guarantees the previous year. You could see the cap hit as a result because the cash is significantly lower. It's a $45.4 million scheduled cap commitment with a cash flow that potentially sits between $1 million in performance incentives, a $5 million roster bonus, and then the $31 million base salary that's due. You're looking at a grand total of $37 million in cash flow that year versus these other years are mid-40s and up. This is a notable turning point in this contract where decisions can be made. If things are going good, this is probably the point where Tua says, hey, I've been getting a certain price point the last couple of years, and now I'm scheduled to make under $40 million with presumably the salary cap that's continuing to skyrocket. I'd love to get that readjusted. Why don't we negotiate that? That'll be his age 28 season in which this year comes into play. Then in 2028, there's not a lot of fluff attached to this. It's $41,400,000 in non-guaranteed salary. There's no guarantees attached to it, and then an additional $7 million roster bonus that is due at some point in that season. So there's roster bonuses, there's signing bonuses, There's guaranteed salary. There's non-guaranteed salary. There's salary that's guaranteed for injury. There's vested money that guarantees at a later date that gets rolled into your practical guarantees. But you take everything here, the base salaries of 1.1 million, 25 million, 54 million, 31 million, 41.4 million. You take the signing bonus of 42. You take the roster bonus in 2025 of $25 million. You got the roster bonuses in 27 and 28 that are not guaranteed. And then you take the $1 million performance incentives for 25, 26, 27, and 28, and you get a grand total of $235,571,000. That is the total of the contract. That is all the money. The salary cap hits out of this, as it is currently scheduled, $9.525 million in 2024, nearly $60 million charge in 2025. But there's about $51 million of that is fluid, that you could save about $40 million against the cap with whatever you choose to do with that contract in 2025. If you want to move the maximum amount of money that you possibly can, you can create $40 million in cap space with a maximum restructure of Tua's contract in next March. The best thing that could happen for the Dolphins from a salary cap perspective, Tua blows this year out of the water, and it becomes a no-brainer to say, we'll take all the cap space from this contract that we can get. We have even more confidence in who you are as a player. There is a cap charge in 2026, as currently stands, of $63.4 million. A cap charge of $45.4 million in 2027, and then a $57.8 million cap charge in 2028. But again, reminder, the only prorated money right now is the $42 million. So when you get through 2025 and 2024, and you start the 2026 calendar year and league year, if you don't do anything with Tua's contract next offseason, you're talking, you have less than $26 million in potential dead money in outs of that contract, depending on what you choose to do with it. This is an extremely, extremely fluid contract, especially relative to the terms that you would expect. And it's by design that they can take information as it comes while simultaneously ensuring that they have a contract in place with the player to ensure that the player's attention is focused on the right thing, which is football. And SpotRack made a great point because they did a whole summary of this contract, and they said that the 3-year cash flow of this contract is about $34 million more than what a 5th-year option and consecutive franchise tags would be. So for the price of $34 million over 3 seasons, is that worth it to have Tua have the confidence of a deal in place and to have maximum cap flexibility at your disposal as far as how to create space, as compared to if it's the franchise tag, just like it's just the 5th-year option, you can't do anything with it against the cap. That's the price that they paid from now through 2026 in that regard. And you could get to 2027, pay the $3 million as far as effectively a buyout. And you're looking at, I think I have these numbers. Make sure I have it right. You could ultimately end up having, if you moved on in 2027 as a post-June 1st cut, you could save about $10 million in 2027 against what you're currently scheduled for, and then you can save about $12 million in 2028 versus what you're currently scheduled for. So you have these 3 seasons, and that's after you do the maximum restructures in 2025 and 2026. So if you take the best case scenario for the next 3 seasons, and then the Dolphins want to go a different direction once all the guaranteed money runs out, they can still save $10+ million against the cap in each of 2027 and 2028. I'm letting this hang for a reason. I'll let that sink in. I know this is a lot of numbers. I know this is a lot of information. I know we're drinking through the fire hose right now. But as you get these full terms and you sit down and you look at this and you say, okay, here's the wins for Tua. Okay, here's the wins for the Dolphins. The Dolphins kind of have a firm commitment for 3 seasons in which logic is going to dictate unless something dramatic comes along as far as a dramatic shift or change of direction that's just too good to be true. With how it's structured, they're at least in place to take it. But logic would dictate 2024, 2025, and 2026 are years in which Tua Tagovailoa is going to be the starting quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. And then in 2027, that's kind of when that next fork in the road with decisions is going to come. And I don't think it's necessarily coincidence that coincides 2026, right? It's when Tyreek Hill's contract currently is set to expire. Now, we'll see if they end up doing something with that deal or not. But the next 3 years, nucleus of this team, kind of phasing guys into big contracts, phasing guys out of big contracts, locking guys up long-term that were part of your draft. That's kind of where we're at within this life cycle of the Dolphins. This competitive window with probably this ideology that you saw this offseason for Miami, I would assume will continue through 2026. And they'll try to put the best roster around their pillar players that they possibly can. And they're continuing to identify who those pillar players are. Tua Tagovailoa is now amongst them with a contract extension. That's going to do it for us here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins, breaking down the Dolphins contract with Tua with the full details courtesy of a report from Pro Football Talk. Also, Spot Rack chipping in with putting it all together. My own individual interpretation of that as far as a spreadsheet with colors, pretty colors, automatic populating cells that calculate the numbers as you put it in, all that stuff. But this one's in the books, right? And for $235 million across 5 seasons, the exchange of that for Miami, when you really sit down, you want to boil it down to a very simplistic exchange is how long did Robert Hunt and Christian Wilkins sign for, and what dollar amounts did they sign for? Because Christian Wilkins signed 4 years, $110 million. Robert Hunt signed 5 years for $100 million. So that's 210 versus a $212 million contract for Tua. That's the exchange that took place. If you want to just have basic math. I'm not a math guy, but I can do that. The last thing, the performance incentives, not the workout bonuses and the per game active bonuses. There are bonuses attached to this that required Tua to play at least 50% of the snaps in any given season. And then it's tiered. Every postseason win that you log, there's a 6-figure bonus that's attached to. And that goes all the way up to if you play 50% of the snaps in the season and you win the Super Bowl, there's an extra $1 million available to you. Let's hope we get that. Let's cash that one in and then worry about what that does to the salary cap, right?